Today, we're going to talk about a moment that completely shattered the global fashion industry. We're digging into the collapse of the Rana Plaza factory. And really, this was so much more than just a building falling down. It was a human catastrophe that pulled back the curtain on the real cost of the clothes we buy every day. Just look at that number, 1,134. That's how many people died. It's a number that's almost impossible to wrap your head around. This isn't just some statistic. It represents the deadliest single disaster in the entire history of the garment industry. And this quote right here, it gets to the absolute heart of the matter. It's the question that hangs over this entire story. It forces all of us to look past the physical wreckage and really grapple with the system itself, the pressures from giant brands, our own shopping habits, everything that set the stage for this to happen. So to really understand the full picture, we have to start with the day it happened. Let's go back to that moment, to a building that in a matter of seconds became a tomb. Here's what you need to know. The date was April 24th, 2013. The place, Savar, Bangladesh. And the event, an 8-story building packed with 5 different clothing factories just pancaked. It collapsed into itself right in the middle of a busy workday. And if the death toll wasn't staggering enough, you have this number. 2,600 people were injured. We're talking about people trapped in rubble for days, suffering horrific, life-changing injuries, amputations, you name it. The scale of the human suffering is just immense. But here's the part of the story that's truly haunting. This was not a surprise. It was not a random act of God. It was completely 100% preventable. The warning signs were literally written on the walls, and as we're about to see, they were deliberately ignored. Okay, just follow this timeline of the final 24 hours. The day before the collapse, huge cracks start appearing in the walls. Engineers are called in and they are crystal clear. Get everyone out now. The bank and the shops on the ground floors, they listened. They closed immediately. But the garment factories upstairs, their managers, facing insane production deadlines, ordered their workers to come back. Some workers were even told they'd be fired if they didn't show up. The next morning at 8:57 a.m., the whole thing came down. So you have to ask yourself, why? Why on earth would anyone make a decision like that? Well, to answer that, we have to zoom out from the building itself and look at the whole system, the entire fast fashion machine. And this right here explains so much. On one hand, you have this relentless demand from Western brands for cheaper and cheaper clothes, the $5 t-shirt. On the other hand, you have the reality for the person making that t-shirt. In 2013, the minimum wage in Bangladesh was just $68 a month. That massive gap creates a system where every corner is cut, especially when it comes to safety. It was a perfect storm of failures. I mean, the building was only supposed to be 5 stories tall. 3 more were tacked on it legally. It was built to be a commercial space, not to handle the immense weight and vibrations of industrial machines. They put massive, heavy generators up on the roof, literally shaking the building apart. And all of this was fueled by those crazy fast fashion deadlines and a building owner who used his political ties to get away with it all. These were the cracks in the system, long before they ever appeared in the concrete. A tragedy this big, this horrifying, it couldn't be swept under the rug. The collapse set off an international firestorm. It forced a moment of reckoning for the entire fashion industry. In the aftermath, 2 major groups were formed. First, you had the Accord. This was a really big deal, a legally binding safety agreement signed by a ton of European brands and global unions. Then you had the Alliance, which was a voluntary, non-binding group formed by North American companies. Now, that difference, legally binding versus voluntary, is everything. It became the most critical distinction in the entire response. On top of the safety agreements, there was the urgent issue of compensation. After a lot of back and forth, a fund was set up. In the end, $30 million was raised to provide some financial relief to the victims and the families of those who died. So, okay, let's fast forward a decade. After all the headlines, all the promises, all the new agreements, did it work? Has anything fundamentally changed, or was it all just for show? And the answer is yes, there has been real tangible progress. Thanks directly to the Accord, more than 1,600 factories have been inspected. We're talking about thousands of potentially deadly problems, bad wiring, structural issues, fire hazards that have been found and fixed. Factories are without a doubt safer for millions of workers today. But the human side of the story, that's much more complicated. This chart tells a powerful story. 10 years on, look at that. Almost 2/3 of the survivors never went back to work in a garment factory. For so many, the physical and psychological trauma was just too severe. They couldn't bring themselves to set foot inside a factory ever again. So what about accountability? What happened to the people responsible? Well, the owner of the building, a man named Sohail Rana, along with 40 others, officials, factory owners, they were all eventually charged with murder. But the justice system there moves incredibly slowly. And believe it or not, more than a decade later, those trials are still going on. And all of this brings us to the really tough, unresolved questions that this disaster dragged out into the light. Questions about blame, about ethics, and about how our global economy really works. This is a big one, right? When these huge brands are constantly pushing for lower prices and faster production, knowing full well what that means on the ground, does that make them responsible? Or are they just giving us, the shoppers, what we want? It's a really blurry line. And you have to remember, Rana Plaza didn't happen in a vacuum. There were other disasters before it. Just a few months earlier, the Tazareen Fashions fire killed over 100 people. The alarms had been ringing for years. So why? Why did it take a body count this high to finally get the industry to agree to safety rules that actually had teeth?
And that leaves us here with maybe the most important question of all. Companies love to talk about voluntary codes of conduct, about policing themselves, but Rana Plaza seems to prove that when the financial pressure gets high enough, those voluntary promises can just fall apart. The Accord showed that legally binding rules can work. So the debate that rages on is, can we ever really trust companies to do the right thing on their own? Or does safety always need the force of law to back it up?